The wedding venue was a sprawling, sun-drenched vineyard estate, the kind of place I'd only ever seen in magazines. The air was warm and smelled of blooming roses and rich, fertile earth. I stood near a grand oak tree, my best suit feeling a little tight, a cheap off-the-rack garment in a sea of tailored linen and silk. But my heart was overflowing. After 25 years of raising him on my own, of late-night shifts at the factory, and weekends spent coaching Little League, my son Leo was getting married. I watched him at the front of the manicured lawn, looking nervous and impossibly handsome, and a wave of pride so powerful it almost stole my breath washed over me. This day, this perfect, expensive day, was the culmination of my life's work. It was all for him. As the guests began to arrive, I made my way to the seating chart, an elegant, gilded easel, holding a large board with names written in beautiful, flowing calligraphy. I scanned the names, looking for my own, expecting to find it in the front row, beside my sister, Sarah. The front row was reserved for immediate family, the place of honor. It was the seat I had pictured myself in for years, the place from which I would watch my son begin his new life. The journey from a tiny, cramped apartment to this sunlit, opulent vineyard suddenly felt very real, a testament to the struggles we had overcome together. I found Leo's mother, my ex-wife Karen, listed in the front row, next to a man named Robert, her husband of the last 5 years. That was expected. But then I saw the designation beside Robert's name, father of the groom. A cold, sharp icicle of dread pierced through the warmth of the day. My eyes frantically scanned the board again. I found my own name, David, 3 rows back. Seated behind Robert. Seated behind the man who had entered my son's life when he was already 20 years old. The man who had never changed a diaper, never sat up with a feverish child, never patched a scraped knee. He was the father of the groom. My feet felt like lead as I walked to my assigned seat. I was in a daze, the cheerful chatter of the other guests fading into a dull, meaningless hum. I found my chair, a simple white folding chair like all the others. And on the small, elegant place card, my name was written in the same beautiful script. And just beneath it, in a smaller, delicate font, was a single, devastating word, guest. I stared at that word, that label, guest. After 25 years of being his father, his only parent, his entire world, I was now, on the most important day of his life, relegated to the status of a mere spectator, a guest at my own son's life. The music began to play, signaling the start of the ceremony. I sat down, my body moving on autopilot, a polite, smiling mask sliding into place. My sister, Sarah, found her seat beside me, her eyes questioning, but I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the back of Robert's expensive, well-tailored suit. He had the seat that should have been mine, the title that should have been mine. As my son took his place at the altar, my view of him was partially obscured. In that moment, the physical obstruction felt like a perfect, cruel metaphor for the emotional one. I had been erased, politely and beautifully, with calligraphy on a place card. The ceremony began under the brilliant, unforgiving afternoon sun. The officiant, a pleasant-looking woman with a warm smile, started speaking about the sanctity of family, about the bonds of love that tie generations together, about the parents whose love and sacrifice make a day like this possible. Every word was a tiny, sharp jab, a reminder of the role I was supposed to be playing versus the one I had been assigned. I thought of the countless sacrifices, the second job I took during Leo's high school years to pay for his college applications, the lonely holidays, the dreams for my own life that I had quietly packed away to make room for his. These were not sacrifices I regretted. They were the very definition of my love for him. But to have them so casually dismissed felt like a negation of my entire life. As the ceremony progressed, a cold, hard knot of anger began to form in my chest, a feeling so foreign it was almost unrecognizable. I was not an angry man, but the injustice of the situation was a slow-burning fire. My sister, Sarah, must have sensed it. She reached over and squeezed my hand, her grip firm and grounding. She didn't say a word, but her touch was a silent acknowledgement of my pain. A message that I was not crazy, that my hurt was valid. Simple act of solidarity was the only thing that kept me from standing up and walking away right then and there. She was my witness, the only other person in the world who truly knew the depth of my journey as a father. The moment I had been dreading arrived. The officiant smiled and asked, "Who has the honor of presenting this man to be married today?" I watched, my heart pounding, as Robert, the stepfather, stood up. He placed a hand on Leo's shoulder and said, "His mother and I do." his mother, and the first not his father. Not the man who taught him how to ride a bike and how to shave. I saw Leo glance back then, a quick, fleeting look in my direction. In his eyes, I saw a flicker of something: guilt, discomfort, apology, but it was gone in an instant. He turned back to the front, back to his bride, and let the moment pass. He made his choice. In front of all these people, he chose to honor the man who paid for the party over the man who had paid for his life. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. The vows, the exchange of rings, the final pronouncement. It was all happening behind a thick pane of glass. I was an observer, detached and numb. I clapped when everyone else clapped. I smiled when everyone else smiled. I performed the role of a happy guest with an aching precision, but inside, I felt a profound sense of dislocation, as if I was watching a film of someone else's life. The man at the altar looked like my son, but the context, the story being told, was one I no longer recognized, a revised history in which I was only a footnote. When they were pronounced husband and wife, a joyous cheer went up from the crowd. Leo and his new bride walked back down the aisle, their faces alight with a happiness that felt both beautiful and painful to witness. As they passed my row, Leo's eyes met mine again. This time, his smile faltered for a second. He knew what he had done, what he had allowed to be done. But the moment was gone, and he was swept away in a flurry of congratulations and rose petals, leaving me sitting in my designated guest chair, my heart a heavy broken thing in my chest. The reception was held in a grand rustic barn that had been transformed into a fairy tale setting, with twinkling lights and cascades of white flowers. The sheer expense of it all was overwhelming. This was Karen and Robert's world, a world of casual, effortless wealth, so different from the careful, budget-conscious life I had built for Leo. I felt a growing sense of alienation, a man in a borrowed suit at a party I didn't belong to. I watched my ex-wife, Karen, flit between tables, the proud mother of the groom, accepting congratulations. She never once made eye contact with me. To her, I was a ghost from a past life she had successfully shed. I needed to speak to Leo. I needed to understand. I waited until after the first dance, after he had made the rounds to the most important tables. I finally caught him alone for a moment near the bar as he was grabbing a glass of water. I didn't want to cause a scene, to add any more drama to a day already saturated with it. I kept my voice low, my tone filled with the hurt I could no longer conceal. Leo, I started, the seating chart, the place card. Can you just tell me why? I needed to hear it from him, to understand the thought process that had led to my public erasure. His response was a fumbling, evasive mess of excuses. He wouldn't look me in the eye, his gaze fixed on a point just over my shoulder. Dad, it's not a big deal, he mumbled, a phrase that felt like a slap in the face. Mom and Robert, they paid for everything. The whole wedding. They just wanted it all to look, cohesive, uniform. It was their vision for the day. It doesn't mean anything. You're my dad. You're the one who raised me. He was trying to placate me, to minimize the profound disrespect as a simple matter of wedding aesthetics, of party planning. Not a big deal, I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Leo, I sat in the third row and watched another man be honored as your father. My name card said guest. Do you have any idea what that feels like? After everything. It wasn't about the money, son. It was about respect. It was about acknowledging 25 years of my life, of our life together. It was about acknowledging the truth. And you stood there and let them tell a different story. My words were not angry, but they were heavy with the weight of my pain. And for the first time, he seemed to register the depth of the wound. Before he could respond, his new wife, radiant and smiling, appeared at his side, looping her arm through his. There you are. We need to cut the cake, she said cheerfully, completely oblivious to the tense, painful conversation she had just interrupted. Leo gave me one last, apologetic look, a silent plea for understanding, before allowing himself to be led away. I was left standing by the bar, alone again. The conversation had provided no comfort, no resolution. It had only confirmed my worst fear. My son had willingly traded my dignity for a conflict-free day and a beautifully cohesive, expensive lie. I escaped the noise and forced merriment of the barn and found a quiet stone terrace overlooking the vineyard. The sun had set, and a cool breeze rustled the grape leaves. The sky was a deep, velvet blue, studded with a million indifferent stars. The city, a distant glow on the horizon, felt a world away. I just needed to breathe. to find a moment of peace away from the curated joy of the party. A few moments later, my sister Sarah found me, a glass of water in her hand. "I figured you could use this," she said softly, her presence a familiar comfort in the disorienting landscape of my pain. "You are not a guest, David," she said, her voice fierce with an anger she was feeling on my behalf. "Don't you let them make you feel like one. I remember the nights you came home from the factory, covered in grease, and still had the energy to help him with his science fair project. I remember you selling your old car, the one you loved, to pay for his braces. I remember you sitting, alone at every single parent-teacher conference, every single school play. You weren't a guest then. You were his entire world." Her words, her memories, were a balm on my wounded spirit, a powerful validation of the life I had lived, prompted by her unwavering support. I found myself opening up, the carefully constructed walls I had built around my pain beginning to crumble. I spoke of the loneliness of the early years, the constant fear of not being enough, of failing him somehow. I talked about the quiet pride I felt watching him grow into a good man, the simple joys of playing catch in the park or teaching him to drive. These were the small, unglamorous moments that constituted a life, a fatherhood. They were memories that couldn't be bought, memories that Robert, for all his wealth, would never have. We spoke about Karen, his mother. We didn't speak with bitterness, but with a sad clarity. We remembered her as the young, overwhelmed girl who had felt trapped by motherhood and had chosen to walk away. Her return to Leo's life 5 years ago, with a wealthy new husband in tow, had been a whirlwind of expensive gifts, lavish vacations, and a lifestyle I could never provide. We talked about the powerful, seductive influence of that wealth, and how it had slowly, almost imperceptibly, shifted the dynamics of our family, culminating in the painful spectacle of the wedding. That conversation on the terrace didn't solve anything, but it was profoundly healing. It was a shared acknowledgement of the truth. Sarah's unwavering belief in me, in the significance of my role as a father, was a powerful antidote to the poison of the place card. She reminded me that my value was not determined by my seat at a wedding or a label on a piece of paper. It was measured in years of love, sacrifice, and devotion. Her support didn't erase the hurt, but it gave me the strength to face the rest of the evening with my head held high, my dignity intact. As the evening wore on, with the toasts and cake cutting underway, I found myself making a quiet plan to slip out early. The thought of enduring several more hours of this curated performance was exhausting. I was standing near the edge of the dance floor, watching the happy couples swirl under the lights, when a man approached me. It was Robert, the stepfather, a man whose presence I had been actively avoiding all night. He looked awkward and uncomfortable, his hands shoved in the pockets of his expensive trousers. My immediate instinct was to be defensive, to put up a wall, but his expression was not one of confrontation. "David," he began, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I know this must be incredibly awkward, difficult. I just wanted to say, for what it's worth, that the seating arrangement felt wrong to me." I argued against it. I was so taken aback by his admission that I was momentarily speechless. He was the man who had taken my place, the symbol of my erasure, and here he was, apologizing for it. Karen and Leo were insistent, he continued, a note of resignation in his voice. They had a vision for the day, and they wanted to present a united front. I think they handled it very badly. He looked me in the eye, and for the first time, I saw him not as a rival, but as another man caught in a complicated family dynamic. "You raised a fine young man, David," he said, his voice full of a sincerity that I couldn't doubt. "I've only been around for a few years. I'm just the guy who showed up at the end with a checkbook. You did all the real work, all the hard stuff. I hope you know that. And I hope you know that Leo knows that, even if he has a terrible way of showing it right now." His words were a validation from the most unexpected of sources. He was giving me the respect that my own son had failed to. My defenses crumbled. I had been prepared for arrogance, for condescension, for a quiet assertion of his new role. Instead, I was met with humility and respect. "Thank you for saying that, Robert," I managed to reply, my voice a little thick with emotion. "It means a lot." We stood there for a moment in a surprisingly comfortable silence. Two men from different worlds, connected by our love for the same young man. He was not my enemy. He was just another person navigating the messy, complicated reality of a blended family. Our brief conversation fundamentally shifted my perspective. The anger I had been directing at him, this symbol of my replacement, was misumed. He was not the architect of my pain. The responsibility for that lay with my son and my ex. Robert's unexpected olive branch didn't heal the wound, but it cleansed it of a certain poison. It allowed me to see the situation with a clearer, more focused lens. My fight was not with him. It was with the choices of the people who were supposed to be my family. As the time for the wedding toasts approached its conclusion, my sister Sarah leaned over to me. "Are you going to give your speech?" she whispered. I had a speech prepared, of course. I had been working on it for weeks. A few simple, heartfelt paragraphs written on a small note card that was now burning a hole in my jacket pocket. But after everything that had happened, the thought of standing up and speaking to that crowd felt like an impossible task. What could I possibly say? How could I toast a future that had begun with such a profound act of disrespect towards me? My silence felt like the only dignified response left. "You have to, David," Sarah insisted, her voice firm. "You are his father. You have a right to speak. Don't let them silence you. Don't let them have the final word on what this day means. Stand up and be the father you have always been." Her words were a call to action, a challenge to my own sense of defeat. She was right. To stay seated, to remain silent, would be to accept the role they had assigned me. It would be an acceptance of my own erasure. My speech was my last opportunity to reclaim my narrative, to assert my true place in my son's life, not with anger, but with love. So, I stood up. A hush fell over the room as I walked towards the microphone. I could feel my ex-wife Karen's eyes on me, probably dreading what I was about to say. I could see the nervous, pleading look on Leo's face. I took a deep breath, unfolded the note card, and then set it aside. The speech I had prepared no longer felt right. I needed to speak from the heart. I looked directly at my son and began to talk, my voice steady and clear. I didn't mention the seating chart. I didn't mention the place card. I didn't allude to any of the pain or disrespect I had been shown. Instead, I told a story. I told them about a 6-year-old boy who was terrified of the dark, and how we had spent a whole summer camping in the backyard, just the two of us, so he could learn to love the stars more than he feared the shadows. I spoke of his kindness, his work ethic, his good hard qualities I had watched him develop over years of scraped knees, broken hearts, and small triumphs. I spoke of a father's love, a love that is not about grand gestures or expensive gifts, but about the quiet, steadfast presence of someone who will always be there. No matter what, my toast was an act of quiet rebellion. It was a reclamation of my fatherhood, not through anger or accusation, but through the simple, powerful act of sharing a history that only a father could know. I ended by telling Leo how proud I was of the man he had become, and I welcomed his new wife into our family with a sincerity that was real, despite the pain. As I raised my glass, I saw tears streaming down my son's face. In that moment, I knew he understood. My speech hadn't erased the hurt, but it had transcended it. I had chosen love over bitterness, and in doing so, I had shown everyone in that room, including my son, what it truly means to be a father. The morning after the wedding, I sat in my small kitchen, the silence of my apartment, a stark contrast to the noise and chaos of the previous day. The sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I felt a strange mixture of emotions, a deep, lingering sadness, but also a quiet sense of peace. I had faced the humiliation with a dignity I didn't know I possessed. I had spoken my truth, not with anger, but with love. I had done everything I could. The rest was out of my hands. I had made my peace with the situation, accepting the painful reality of my new diminished role in my son's life. Just as I was pouring my first cup of coffee, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Leo's name. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Dad." His voice was thick, choked with an emotion I hadn't heard from him since he was a small child. "Dad, I am so sorry." The words came out in a rush, a torrent of shame and regret. "Your speech last night. Listening to you tell that story, it was like a lightning bolt. I saw everything so clearly. I was a coward. Dad, I let Mom and Robert's money, their vision, become more important than you. There is no excuse. I am so ashamed of what I did, of what I allowed them to do. It was a terrible, unforgivable mistake." I listened, my own eyes welling up. It was the apology I had so desperately needed to hear, but had never expected to receive. I didn't absolve him immediately. The wound was too deep for a simple "it's okay." I told him, "I appreciate that, son, but the hurt is real. It's not going to disappear overnight. What you did, it changed things. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be a different one now. It has to be one built on a new kind of honesty, on a respect that I have to know I can count on. I was drawing a line in the sand, not to punish him, but to protect myself, to ensure that our future relationship would be one of a man to another man, not just a father to a son. Conversation was the beginning of a long, slow process of healing. It was not a magical fix. The chasm that had opened between us would take time to bridge. But for the first time, I felt a sense of hope. My son had finally seen past the glitter and the wealth and had recognized the true value of the love and sacrifice that had raised him. My personal growth came not from demanding an apology, but from acting with a grace that inspired one. I had created a space where my son could find his own way back to the truth, and back to me. So many of us pour our entire lives into our children, making sacrifices that go unseen and unacknowledged. We do it not for a thank you, but out of a love so profound it defines us. But what happens when that love is pushed aside, relabeled, or made to feel like a guest in a life it built? Have you ever felt erased by your own family? Have you ever had to fight for your rightful place in your own story? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story is a testament to the silent strength of parents everywhere, and it's a powerful reminder to others that they are not alone. If this story resonated with the parent in you, subscribe for more, and share this with anyone who has ever given their all for their family.